It's on the kitchen counter. I did. On the kitchen counter. I did. On the kitchen counter. Hi, Jerry. Are you muted? You know what? I got you muted.
Ah,
There you are.
okay.
You're good. Hello, hello.
How are you?
Okay. I'm
Good.
doing well. How are you?
I am a little overwhelmed.
Just a little?
Not with medical concerns. That's easy. You just need a lot of soap. But
Yeah.
I'm a little overwhelmed with so much contact. I like my prior life
Okay.
of not being in contact so much. I am a little overwhelmed.
So hold on a second, Jerry. You're perfect because there's a
Not
feedback
with
loop
the,
going on here.
Yeah. Not with medical concerns. That's easy. You just need a lot of soap. But,
Yeah.
I'm a little overwhelmed with so much contact. I like my prior life of not being in contact so much. I am a little overwhelmed.
So hold on a second, Jerry. You're perfect because there's a feedback loop going on here.
Yeah. Not with medical concerns. That's easy. You just need a lot of soap. But I'm a little overwhelmed with so much contact. I like my prior life not being in contact so much. I am a little overwhelmed.
So hold on a second, Jerry. You're perfect because there's a feedback loop going on.
Yeah. Not with medical concerns. That's easy. You just need a lot of soap.
All right, Jerry, you still there?
I am, but I've lost the picture. Wait a second.
Did you see? Am I back now?
I've lost the video, I think.
Okay. Let's see. Hey, Doran.
That's easy. You just need a lot of soap.
Hey, Doran.
Hi, Josh. How are you?
I am, but I've lost the picture.
So we're just figuring out how to. I want to mute the.
I've lost the video, I think.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Okay. Oh, okay. I've got that. Maybe I should just mute me.
Can I mute? Hey, Doran.
Hi, Josh. How are you?
Awesome. All right. Woo. Okay, now that's an interesting thing. Let's hope this works. Okay, what I did is I muted. I'm also trying to broadcast Facebook Live. And what was happening is it was going from my feed onto the Facebook, which is working, and that's great. And then it, here, let's see. Man, yes. All right, good. And I'm getting messages. I think it's working now. So that's good. Look at us with our newfangled technology. Tell me that that's what's overwhelming you, Jerry, when I heard it go 3 times through the feedback loop.
No, what's overwhelming me is that I'm having daily contact 4 or 5 times with people that I usually talk with 4 or 5 times a year.
Right.
Plus, I'm getting these incredible learning offers from the summit, the JTS, and 3 other online things that usually send me once a week emails. But now it's every day. They're unearthing their archives, and they're often things that I refused to pay for when it was fresh, and now it's available for free. So it's quite exhausting.
Yeah, I think I was describing it to somebody else. Like it's like the world is vomiting online, and
Right.
we're just trying to like get in contact with each other in any way that we can possible. Hello,
Right.
Laura Berger. So nice to see you. That's great. So we are trying to figure this all out. It looks like it's also broadcasting live on the Facebook. That sounds like I'm an old man, the Facebook. But I live in Southern California, and that's how we refer to our freeways. You take the 405 to take the 101 to get to the 10, and then you go to Las Vegas. Maybe. Or I think the 10 would take you to Palm Springs first. Maybe that would be a good place to go. So it's great. I'm gonna be focused on this space. So if you're like in the Zoom, that's a great place to be. And there are friends that are logging in also through the Facebook live stream. And for anyone that is on Facebook Live and you can get the link to the Zoom video conferencing, I encourage you to do that. And you can find that link on the vbs.org/Valley Best Shalom at home, or VBS at home, I believe is the page. And that's a way that we'll be able to contact each other through the Zoom platform, and then it will be broadcast onto Facebook. Either way, it's just amazing that we're all here, and I'm so grateful and appreciative that you're finding a little time for learning, and that at this time in the evening, after a day since Jerry was on and just talking about how there was an overabundance of contact that we're experiencing despite our physical isolation. It can be quite overwhelming. My friend Ronan is over here. He was talking about how many Zoom meetings he's got scheduled on any given day. I'm even getting messages that are telling me that people are waiting for me to connect on my Zoom page, even though there was nothing scheduled. It seems like, there's just so much excitement to connect. We don't even, we can't even do it at scheduled times. So yeah. Everybody say hi, Becky. There you go. You got some waves. Oh my God, here she comes. Now we're in for something.
Hi.
Hi, Becky.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Great. Hey, Dr. Frost, shalom. And to all the Facebook friends. So it's 7 p.m. We're going to begin. The reason that we're using Zoom in addition to the Facebook Live is that this is an opportunity for us to be a little bit more interactive with our learning. And the kind of text that we're going to be studying tonight, the subject that we're studying tonight is a lot more interactive. This is not just big ideas that are in the ethos and the universe that are confronting us on a global basis, but actually it's a goal for us to take some of the experiences that we're having on a daily basis and our reactions that we're having to the moment, not only currently with this enhanced kind of critical moment of separation and contact, but just, I think this is wisdom that we can apply in every aspect of our lives at any time. So I hope that will become a little bit more evident when we delve further into our text study for this evening. But before we do that, I just wanted to welcome everybody to a Valley Beth Shalom sponsored study session this evening. The title of this series of classes is called Soul Mastery. And it is really based on the wisdom that has been accumulated most prominently in the 18th and 19th centuries, but was really sort of present throughout all of Jewish tradition and has been compiled in a subject that we call Musar. And Musar really means tradition by translation, but it really does refer to the ethical, spiritual teaching of our daily behavior. And as I likened it to, I was likened to it from a colleague. You know, today we're in a very unprecedented kind of life experience. There isn't a whole lot of history in our lifetimes that we can relate to the kind of response to the crisis that's out there in the world as we're experiencing it. So that's prompting us to flex our muscles that we have, but just like if you're exercising physically and you try to flex those muscles and you haven't done it on a regular basis, it could be kind of difficult and it might even be sore. And sometimes you might want to resist it. But there's a truth that we have all of the tools necessary for us to be excellent human beings at any given day, under any circumstance. And it's important for us to take time, like we're taking tonight, to spend some time studying and learning about that. So the purpose of this class and the purpose of all of the online learning that is being provided for you by Valley Beth Shalom is to begin exercising those muscles. It's more than a physical exercise. It's more than a mental exercise. It really is an all-encompassing physical and mental and emotional exercise that is contained in what we call Musar. So by the end of the class, we'll begin to see how we can apply this in a very meaningful way, not only with our mental skills, but also with our spiritual and our emotive skills, and ultimately with our physical skills when the opportunity presents itself. Last couple like plugs about Valley Beth Shalom, and then we'll jump into our studying. There are many, many activities. We have really moved our community into the virtual space online. And so we invite you to participate in every aspect of what we are preparing for the community. We have morning prayers at 7:30. We have evening prayers at 6 p.m. We have story time that's throughout the day. We have some meditation classes that are being offered throughout the day and throughout the week. We have tomorrow night, our Kabbalat Shabbat services are going to be led by Rabbi Feinstein and Canterville Barron. We'll have Havdalah ceremony that is going to be led by Rabbi Farkas and Cantor Barron. We'll have Shabbat morning services, which include our very popular Torah study with Rabbi Feinstein and Rabbi Mark Gelman. And we'll also have Shabbat services for those who want to gather on Shabbat and express prayers. So Valley Beth Shalom, as it always has envisioned itself, is a place for us to gather, not only for learning, a place in which we can enrich our minds and enrich our souls with the text and the ideas of our tradition, but it's a place that we can worship together as a community. Here we're doing it in the virtual space, and God willing, we'll be present with each other, and we'll be able to share a common space and lift up our voices in song and in unison. And we'll lift up our voices as well in common cause and purpose. It's a place for us to act together. And if you haven't seen the abundance of opportunities for connection, there's places that we're trying to respond to the caring needs that we have for each other. Some of us are feeling a tremendous amount of stress or anxiety at this time, and we have in our community mechanisms to support that. But we also take responsibility for the community beyond. And we have a food bank that desperately needs our support. And if you have individually any food items, especially as the Passover holiday is coming near and it's time to begin cleaning out some of the cabinets and pantries, and you begin to see that there's some food that you can contribute to the food bank, now is a really good time to contribute that. And we are prepared to do that in a safe and a hygienic manner. And it's also a place for us to be together and just be on the lookout for times when we can just check in and connect. I think Rabbi Farkas is holding just a Valley Beth Shalom check-in on Sunday morning. So if you're into that and you want to be able to connect with other members of our Valley Beth Shalom community, we invite you to do so. So in concluding all of the PSAs about Valley Beth Shalom, we're going to turn back in now, and we're going to study our subject for the night. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to actually share the text. I sent it in advance, and if you didn't see the text, it was also posted on the Valley Beth Shalom website. And I think I also tried to post it into the Facebook feed. But if you didn't get any of those texts, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to find the button where I can share my screen. And there you'll be able to see, hello, no, that's not it. Hold on a second. Let me get to that place. Give me just a moment to get the text for everybody. There we go. Okay. Ready?
No.
You're not ready?
Ah,
How about now?
now.
Yay. All right, there it is. So here's our text study. The subject that I'd like for us to learn together this evening is entitled Preshut. That's the word in Hebrew. Hafrashah is separation. It's literally like in agricultural terms, it's the act of separating the chaff from the wheat so that you can glean the wheat and the berries of the wheat and then turn that eventually into flour, which would make bread and all kinds of important stuff of life. But Preshut here in this context is about separation. And it really opens up for me a basic subject and context for us. I think we feel it so presently because we are literally and physically separate from each other. Talking to so many people, the world is like 75% absent. If you try to drive down the streets, if you've been to the supermarkets, maybe the supermarkets are the busiest places in the world, but if you just try to drive on the freeways or go any place in the city, you just notice that the sheer content, the magnitude of people has reduced dramatically because we're all separated physically. And as we're doing that, I've been thinking about this idea. It's actually a very deep Jewish idea. We hear it in traditional context called Shomer Negia. Are you familiar with Shomer Negia? Right, Shomer Negia is that it's more used in a traditional context in more traditional communities where men and women actually physically don't touch each other. And if you've ever encountered a person who practices what is called Shomer Negia, that you would perhaps extend your hand to shake the person's hand, and the person would hopefully kindly tell you that they are a person who observes this practice, this custom, whether it's a custom that's based on ritual purity or it's a custom that's based on a kind of spiritual purity. But there is a very well-practiced behavior within traditional communities of separating people physically. In that context, it's referred more directly to separating between the genders, that men and women don't exchange handshakes, hugs, embraces, touches, that somehow that encounter would lead to some kind of elevated, more physical response, and that kind of physicality, that sort of chemistry that people feel when they're physically present with each other is elevated when you come into contact, with someone of the other gender. Now, that tradition doesn't take into account the very well understood beliefs and feelings and experiences and realities of people that have different levels of physical attraction to other people. Sometimes that's between people of the same gender. Sometimes there's people of varieties of gender identity, and there's another level of attraction that exists in those places. But I wanted to take Shomer Negia a little bit further, because I think it's something that we've been mandated by the county, the state, even in the national conversation, for us to have social distancing in which we practice some kind of like physical separation from people and each other. And I imagine that you're feeling a lot like I am, which is that, you know, you're walking down the street, you're walking your dog, which I've done 78 times so far today. And my dog is the happiest of all of us because he is getting more attention than he's had in his entire lifetime in our family. And we're walking on the street, and you know, there's another person walking their dog down the street, and we literally have to cross the street in order to avoid them because we're trying to practice the safe social distancing. And I think, well, perhaps that's dramatic because of the sort of you know, crisis and concern and fear that's out there with the potential contamination, infection that could exist, and we only know how real that is as continued cases of this this virus and those who are affected by it becomes known to us. But this idea of practicing safe touch and encounter through separation is something that I think our tradition has a lot to speak about. So take a look at the text. I've been talking, and hopefully you've been hearing, and you've been looking at the text. So Shomer Negia is protected content. And I've offered for us 3 sort of texts of tradition just to give you a sense of them. This is a verse from Leviticus, which isn't the source of this like Shomer Negia protection of our contact, but it's actually one of the underlying contexts of what it means to be separate. And so here it is from the book of Leviticus. I am the Lord your God who has set you apart from other peoples. Now, in that verse, it's clearly talking about the Jewish people and the particular Jewish practices that are being commanded to the Israelites in the desert for how they're going to conduct themselves when they come into contact with God. But it is a pretext for how we also sort of relate with each other in the world. And while it says other peoples, I don't think you should read it as being Jews and non-Jews, but really see it as people who take on this very conscious behavior of sacred distancing, finding connection that isn't predicated on physical contact alone. That's a muscle that we need to begin flexing and practicing and eventually strengthening. And that's what this text study is going to provide for us. The Proverbs text, the next one says, discretion will protect you, understanding will guard you. And I love this. This is a great line, right? In other words, just think about what I think is being said. Discretion is, you know, when people say stuff and your impulse is to react maybe sharply or judgmentally or critically, and your discretion is maybe I shouldn't say exactly what is on my mind at this particular moment because that would just make it a little bit worse than it feels right now. And that's, you know, that's the negative. The positive is, you know, sometimes you want to offer just words of comfort. You want to offer words of condolence to people, but people are so overwhelmed with their own feelings that if you were to try and express a word of comfort to them at that moment, it might set them off and make them angry. That kind of discretion is something that we well practice in our Judaism, and it's a great quality to embody as a good, soulful human being. The second part of the line, understanding will guard you. That is even more extensive than discretion. Discretion is in the moment, but understanding is a deeper and it's a broader, it's a more comprehensive understanding. It's a comprehensive behavior that you practice all the time. Understanding something is meaning that you have reached a conclusion about the way of being in the world. It may not be the only way of being in the world for you for the rest of your life, but it's the way that you see the world at this place and from this frame of reference. That kind of understanding is something that you want to refer to when you are ready to encounter other people or to take a step out into the world and to share some sort of responsibility with the world, however it's manifest. And the third one about Shomer Negia, just before we go further into pre-shut and separation and what it really means, this is from the Ramban, Moshe ben Nachman. He wrote it around the year 1200. He lived from the end of the 1100s to about 1270, I believe. And so we're not exactly sure what time that this quote was given. It's in many of his works. And what it says is, acts such as hugging and kissing do not violate a negative commandment of the Torah, but only a rabbinic prohibition. And what I mean to bring this is that when we talk about what it means to practice safe social distancing, what it means to practice this new kind of encounter with people, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't ever hug or kiss a person. But it means that when the rabbis were trying to establish that kind of behavior, they had a very particular mindset. And it was for them, in that particular mindset, about encounters between two individuals that had the potential for sexual attraction. And in order for them to diminish or to separate themselves from the potential impact of that sexual attraction, whether it was impulsive behavior or, God forbid, it could be even more aggressive behavior, there's an importance in the ability of understanding that being in contact with people is something so important. It's so vital to us as human beings. And we're all looking forward to the day that we can give the people that we love the most hugs, and the people that we care about embraces, and that we can shake their hands. And I think that this is sort of our modernist interpretation. And it's where we as non-Orthodox Jews can understand that the rabbinic prohibition was a very particular understanding in a particular context. And it's why we don't practice shomer negia when we're not all isolated in our homes and practicing this kind of isolation. But when we're out in the world, and when we sit with each other in prayer, and when we give each other hugs and embrace, when we see each other in the synagogues or in our communities or along the way. I think we're all learning the very important message about how to do that a lot more safely. We're going to have to continue to practice that for months to come. It may be a new reality for us about how we actually comport ourselves. So let me stop for a moment. For any of my friends that are in the Zoom call, any comments, reactions, responses, anything to add on these texts before we go a little bit further into what separation means in the Musar context? Can I get some thumbs up? Anybody on the Facebook Live, send me some of those little smiley faces and hearts, and just let us know that you're here with us. And let's move on to the next text. Okay? Now, the next text is from the book, which is kind of like the preeminent. Yeah, Jerry, I love that. I got a thumbs up from Jerry. Way to go. The book is called Mesilat Yesharim, The Path of the Just is how it's commonly translated. And it's written by author Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. And it's about 1740. I said around 1740 because that's at least one of the known first editions of this book. He lived to be till about 1747. He was a very young man, quite prolific in these final years. This was sort of his magnum opus. He has a couple other books and writings that are out there. But this book really charts out and lays out for us the qualities, the virtues that we should practice, that we should develop within ourselves to be what he calls a chassid, a saintly person. And a chassid is, I had spoken the other day about chesed. Chesed is kindness, and the idea that chassidut is sort of a profound kindness. It's just embodying a sense of kindness in your actions and behaviors throughout your day. So just to give this book, I'm going to stop the share of the text for a second and show you a great book. Hello, everybody. This is the Mesilat Yesharim book, okay? This is the translation by my teacher, Rabbi Ira Stone. It's all in English. If you really like the book, you can send me a message and I'll get you the information more directly. But for anybody who's studied it, it is really a profound book with a lot of hard work to do. The translation, it makes it easier in English, but the activity, the demands that it places upon us is really a challenge. So if you're up for the challenge, if you're ready to stretch yourself, if you really want to exercise these muscles that you have, that you're born with, of being an excellent soul, that is a great book to start with. So now look in the text. This is from Mesilat Yesharim, and it is on this text called Prishut, separation. So I'm going to do the honors of reading for us, and I hope you all have the text. And if you don't, just listen along, and hopefully you'll pick up as much as possible. Separation is the beginning of Chassidut. All that we have thus far set forth is what a person must do in order to be righteous. Now, in the book, this is about halfway through the book. And that's why he says, all that we have thus set forth. In other words, why I'm introducing this to you is not to go through the process of all of the midot, the qualities that you need to practice in order to eventually reach this quality of Chassidut. But the reason that it's an important one, other than a timeliness of it, is that it's important for us to keep in mind what's the end result, what's the ultimate goal. And the ultimate goal is this sort of profound kindness, Chassidut, call it saintliness. And he says separation is the first part of that. So let's continue. Separation and zeal, or zirizut, constitute the doing of good. So let's just meditate on that for a second. Separation constitutes the doing of good. So in this moment that we're finding ourselves right now, in which we actually have to physically separate ourselves because we've been mandated by authority, when it feels like it might be a limitation on our activity, this is a teaching that's telling us that it's an opportunity for us to do good. Now, more than what I think is the safe message, which says that keeping us separated is doing good because we are preventing the potential of us becoming infected with the virus, or the potential of us, if we are infected, spreading it to another, or even if we're sort of afflicted with some other kind of malady that could be a problem from somebody who's immunocompromised. All of those things are real. But what it is saying is that separation is actually the quality that we start with when we want to practice kindness. So how does that work? Let's finish reading and then we'll talk about that. In order to be holy, it is necessary to abstain or separate even from things that are permitted. So the first thing that he says is, just because you can drink all you want, for example, that doesn't mean you should drink all you want. So if you're a healthy person, and it may be really good, I wish I had a drink just to share with you as I was taking a sip myself, and you're concerned about the potential misuse of that as a way of behaving, separation and learning the quality of separation is about practicing the act of abstention, or of separating yourself from that, even though you can do it. The very term separation denotes keeping aloof from things. It therefore implies so restricting oneself in the enjoyment of things permitted as to avoid even coming into contact with things that are forbidden. So implies that even though there are things that you can do, and physical content. I'm a hugger. So that's like, I don't know who else is a hugger. Anybody else a hugger there? I love to hug. For those who know me, if I see you, I want to give you a hug. And I love that hugging, but I can't hug the people that I want to be close to. And it's like affecting me. I'm really getting uncomfortable. And I could say to myself, oh, well, I just need to satisfy my need to hug. So I'm just going to go and hug everybody. Well, not only would I be pushed away, people would run in fear that I was going to give them a hug, but it's also something that would not be a demonstration of me practicing a behavior that is good. Hugging is good, but hugging is good when it's in the right place and at the right time. That's just an example. Let's go on. To practice separation or abstinence means to keep away from anything which, though not in itself evil, might in time, even if not immediately, give rise to evil consequences. So just think for a moment. What are some of those things? I just gave 2 examples: excessive hugging and excessive drinking. I guess you could tell where my mind is, but I think you can all kind of think about that for yourselves. Anybody on the screen, anybody want to share what comes to mind when you say that? So I got a few people. Anybody want to share something? You can go ahead, unmute yourself and say something. Go for it, Laura.
No, I was even thinking, I mean, to me, obvious right now is all of the like internet and information that's out there and overload. Like I can have a little bit. You would think a lot of information is good, but sometimes for me right now, too much is not good. So I'm limiting information that I'm taking in, trying to limit screen time. You know, some of it you think is a good, fun distraction, a little bit of time on the screen, but too much isn't.
All right, that's awesome. Let me just ask a follow-up to you. Do you have like a system? You know, have you figured out how to like create those limitations yet, or is it just sort of like, I know I shouldn't do this as much?
To be honest, at the beginning with the virus and everything going on, I was kind of reading as much as I could. Now I'm trying to read almost nothing. And the little bit of information I get, you know, if Brian or somebody says something to me that I'm interested in, then I'll seek it out. But it's become too much.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else? Jerry, Ronan, Larry, anybody? You all good?
Yeah, I have a question rather than an answer.
Okay.
This comment, the Lozado comment, and some of the others that are in the materials seem to suggest that they're taking your muscle analogy a little too far, because they seem to say that the benefit or wisdom of practicing this difficult thing is just to practice how to do difficult things. In other words, self-control for its own end or as a tool to do something else, but not something that leads necessarily to something closely related to what you're practicing. So I wonder if you think that this was just sort of an aspect of what we would in anybody else's religion call an ascetic trend that's being done for its own sake.
Right. Great question. And I would just go back to the beginning sentence. And if I think I understand you correctly, but I think that the response to that is in that first sentence. Separation is the beginning, right? It's the beginning. So this is like in the middle of the book. And this journey that you would take is that once you kind of have the capacity, but also the presence of mind of what you say is greater self-control, if that's how you want to frame it, or you know, of practicing righteous behavior, that when it's not just enough to be a righteous person. That's, I think, what is being taught here, is that it's great to know that like you are a righteous person, because if somebody does something that you don't agree with, you have the tools in which to respond to that. Right? It doesn't mean just wagging your finger and saying you're doing it wrong in a voice of judgment, but it's actually about being able to say that in a moment, righteous behavior is like, how do you sort of like take the moment as it presents itself, and how are you prepared for that moment so that you can respond in the best way possible? I think that's where we're going with this, and I think the question's great. So if it's okay, let's go on a little bit more. Okay, and now look at, this is from Menachem Mendel of Satanov, the Cheshbon HaNefesh. Cheshbon HaNefesh means the accounting of the soul. It's another one of these Musar works, and it is it's also a way for us to just take this understanding of separation further. This was his interpretation of what separation meant. So he says, strengthen yourself so that you can stop lewd thoughts. So I would just add, it's not just about practicing self-control, but it's also about like the muscle behavior is about knowing that when the thoughts enter, that there's a response that you can react to that is better than your impulse. And then if you practice it well, those are things that just don't even enter your thought. And I think that that's like, when you're a very physically healthy person, right? Doing 20 push-ups is not it doesn't have impact on your body. But if you're the first time that you do 20 push-ups, you're like totally exhausted. So I think it's the same kind of thinking. So then he says, draw close to your spouse only when your mind is free, occupied only with thoughts of fulfilling your conjugal duties and procreating. Okay, so boy, did I bring this text to us? Yes. Why did I bring this text? I didn't want to talk about sex, although that's a lot of fun. And that is a great subject for another point in time. But you should definitely be keeping this in mind. The reason that he includes this and why it's important for us to think about it is because when you're talking about a place in our lives when our experience of our mind or ourself and our experience of the other are close, without the proper mindset, it's easy for that interaction to have less than righteous intention. It less than have kind intention. And if you practice this carefully, then not only will those intimate encounters be ones that are based on deep, loving connection, but they're also a reflection of your own individual preparation for that moment and your ability to share the best of yourself. That kind of lovemaking, whether it's in the bedroom or it's when you're encountering people out along the way, is something that is a really important value and quality that we should all practice. I just like, as we're going through this, and what I wrote down on my notes is that there are times when we actually want to withdraw from other people, when being close is actually important. It's the other side of this. And I think, we have a doctor on the screen, and you know this, and I'm sure that there have been moments in which you have been encountered with people that are very sick, that are ill, that are even dying. And the impulse in that moment is to draw away, because there's something like physically repulsive to being in contact with that somehow there would be some kind of like interchange of that person's malady or that person's illness upon yourself. And so you feel a sense of separation in that moment. And it's precisely in that moment, if you overcome that being in contact with a person who is perhaps, even in the last moments of their life, is so profound. It's so holy. It's so meaningful that if you are privileged to be in the presence of someone in that moment and to hold them in that space, you understand the depth of what this separation and connection is all about. That separation, the opposite of pulling ourselves away because we're repulsed by the person that is in our presence, versus pulling ourselves away so that we can be fully present with the other in the way that they need us to be and we need them to be. That's something that is really worth working on. Any comments, or are we okay? Let's move on, because now I want to get into what Rabbi Ira Stone teaches us, and this is the lengthiest part of our text study tonight. Okay, so here's my favorite thing. This is one of my I wish I could practice this as well as I can say it. The definition of preshut is radical disinterestedness. Radical disinterestedness is the concept that separation is all about. Meaning, not that you are aloof and that you don't care about other people, or that people's needs and concerns are impervious to your own life experience. But radical disinterestedness says that when people are in your presence and when you encounter them from whatever place that they are encountering you, you are able to respond in a place that is right for you and what you hope is right for them. Those moments happen with us all the time and usually not very well. I have children in the house, and more often than not, they're coming at me with all kinds of things that they consider to be extremely important. And my own mind of what I think is important at that particular time isn't consistent with what they think. And my reaction would like to be to tell them to get lost. But practicing radical disinterestedness, like I said, say it, is to be able to create a separation from yourself so that you can actually and authentically respond to a person in the moment and their time of need. Let's read. This is a difficult, complex, and challenging midah quality that assumes that the person working on it has already begun to create a personal identity defined in terms of soul, a space for self and other. So Jerry, this is another addition to your question, which is that when you do this, this is not the second thing that you do, since this is the second class that we've been teaching in this format. But this is something that is part of the spectrum. And I'm presenting it tonight because I want you to see like what happens. This is like the halfway mark. And once you master this, then you can get to some of those deeper qualities and virtues that you're able to practice and embody and live in yourself. You can flex those muscles with great skill. Pre-shoot does require a soul to grapple with it. In other words, you can't do this work unless you are speaking and living and acting from your soul. Radical disinterestedness is not in actuality an action we can take. Instead, it is a consequence. We do not and cannot will ourselves to be radically disinterested. God, I wish I could will myself to be radically disinterested. There are many times that I wish I was just aloof. Oh, really? Well, I can't even give examples. It is rather the Musar work that we do in creating our souls results in being able to attain radical disinterestedness. In other words, it's a practice that we develop. It is the proof that we have succeeded in creating and maintaining a soul. It is the proof that we have a soul worthy of sharing, worthy of being cared for, and it's worthy of being expressed and being understood. We must understand pre-shoot by again reviewing the steps we must take with this very task of life itself, the task of transforming our personal identity from self to soul. The word pre-shoot itself is a rabbinic rendering of a concept of separation that appears in the Torah not as pre-shoot, but as kiddusha. And I love this. And for those who have tuned into any of the things that I've been teaching in the past couple of weeks, I talked about holiness. And holiness is about separation, but it's about separation to create connection. And when you talk about Kedusha, it's not that we're separating ourselves because that which is the thing that we're separating from is too holy, too precious, too divine for us to be encountered with. But when you want to talk about knowing God and being in the presence of God, or you want to talk about sacred behavior and really like having sacred behavior impact your life, it's about how do you connect to that place and be in the right frame of mind. That's what's being meant by this concept of pre-shoot. The focus on caring for others generally and concern for care in sexual intimacy in particular are both found in the book of Leviticus, the biblical book most associated with the concept of Kedusha. The arena of caregiving can be expanded to include not only instances in which we are actually caring for another person who is dependent upon us for that care, but also to our relationship as caregiver to every other person with whom we are in relationship. As with other midot, this wider understanding of giving care can be infinitely extended to describe our relationship to the infinite other, or better, infinite care is the articulation of our relationship with the infinite other. And their infinite other is what we call God. And Rabbi Stone uses that language to talk about what God means. And we can go more deeply into that concept at another point in time, but I think you can appreciate it, that there are others that are in our midst. And they're, there are close family members. Those are the others that are a part of our lives. There's the others that comprise our community and our online universe. And there's the others that comprise the global human community. And if we're in the right frame of mind, we can really be sensitive and caring about the global human community. And then if you extend it infinitely to this concept that God is the infinite extension of that otherness, that's a wonderful concept of God, I think. So what he's saying is pre-shoot separation is a way that we can come into greater contact with that infinite other. Okay, last thing, and then we'll do a little bit of talking practice. When we take responsibility for our own thinking, we give up the illusion that we are victims to that thinking. We can no longer act as though our thoughts creep into our head through no accord of our own. I love this, right? When you take responsibility for your own thinking, when you mean what you think, and when you act upon how you mean to act, you give up the illusion that you are merely a victim to not only other people's reactions to you, but here more specifically and directly, you are not a victim of your own kinds of thinking. There are so many times that we are overwhelmed by the flood of thoughts about what we should do and how we should react and how we should feel and how hurt we are, or how we should feel a lot more care and reaction with the world around us. And when you take responsibility for that, good or bad, if you want to give it those terms, when you're responsible, you're no longer a victim of it. You are not subject to it, right? You can't just feel pride when good things happen when you do good things. You have to feel responsibility also when bad things happen because your thinking and your behavior wasn't aligned with your best self or your best soul. We can no longer act as though our thoughts creep into our head, though no accord of our own. According to Maimonides, pre-shoot is about channeling energy from our basic instincts for sexual relations or even prohibited food to that which is now within our control. Strengthening our mind gives us the ability to focus on cultivating wisdom and to bring kedusha or holiness into the relationship. So let me pause right there for anybody's in the classroom. And does anybody have a comment, response, reaction, question, addition, counter sermon to that thinking before we move on? So far, so good? Jerry.
I'm just struck with an analogy to something that I've said for a long time, which is we all desire happiness, but it's something that has to be a byproduct of something else in our lives, some action of ours. People who pursue happiness as a direct goal end up living miserable lives. So it's very counterintuitive, but happiness is the thing that happens when you're doing something else.
Yeah, wonderful comment. And I would just add, which I think is really important in that statement, right? Pursuing happiness for happiness' sake is the challenge, but the pursuit of happiness, which is, really the language of our Constitution, or it's, the language of our declarations of independence, is the pursuit, the act of moving towards happiness is something noble and soulful, and distinguishing the pursuit of happiness for happiness' sake, or the pursuit itself of the qualities that you need to embody for which happiness would be the result. That's a really important thing to focus on.
Right.
Wonderful. Any other comments? Are we okay? All right. So in this work in general, when it's not in this kind of environment and format, typically this learning is done in small group environments and with exercises in which people can be much more contemplative, and the sharing can be an important part of it. And I want us to practice a little bit of that. So this, you see the word meditation there. Some of you may be very comfortable with it. Some of you may be really, really uncomfortable with it. This is a very simple kind of meditation. This is not deep breathing and the transportation of the soul into some kind of like alternate universe, but it's actually just an ability to slow your thinking down, listen to some of these questions, and to try and respond to them from the place that you think is the best kind of action. So let's try. Okay, so I'm going to read it. If you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. If you would like to just, listen and be attentive to the words on the page, you can do that as well. For those of us online, just give me a little bit of a smiley face and a thumbs up or a heart and tell me that you're ready. Okay, so take a deep breath in and exhale. I do this through the nose and out through the mouth. Already, I know I had an elevated pulse because I've been talking and expressive. So this helps me to slow all that down. And as you're continuing to breathe, I want you to focus on a time when you had the opportunity to take care of another person. Focus on that time. Maybe it was a sick child or a friend, or maybe you took care of someone who was taking care of someone else. In this experience, you were not focused on your own needs at all. In fact, if you focus on that moment, you didn't have any needs at all. You were 100% focused on the other and grateful for the opportunity. And you knew that it was not reciprocal. You knew that your giving wasn't something that you were expecting a reward or recognition or acknowledgement for. You were just giving of yourself. Continue to think about that, review that experience. And let's just give a little bit of shape and contour to that. What was the situation? What was it that happened? And who was the other in that place? And ask deeply, because it might have been the other in the form of a person, but ask deeply. Maybe it was the other. Maybe it was the soul of the other. Or maybe ask even more deeply. Who was the other? Maybe it was a sense of godliness inside that person. Maybe it was a sense of a presence of just divine and radiant being that was beyond the physicality of the person that was in your presence. And you had no needs because you were just serving that otherness. So if you could think a little bit more deeply, when you were acting that way, what were the qualities? What were the things that were motivating you, that helped you to take care of another person? Okay? So just pause for a minute. For my friends that are in the classroom, anybody want to share? Anybody have something that they can offer for us and you're interested to share? Maybe, I know that might be deeply personal, but if you're comfortable sharing in a public space, a very public space, by the way, it would be incredibly appreciative and really valuable. I'll tell you, I have a lot of couples right now that we're supposed to be getting married this weekend and next weekend, and we're talking about rescheduling. And in the midst of the conversations about details and safe distancing and Zooming family members in and trying to get the state license and trying to get all the stuff so that we can actually continue to have a wedding in the right and healthy way, it was important for me to remember that talking to the bride who had so much anticipation for this moment, this great moment in which she was going to radiate to the entire world that she was the most important, pertinent person in the room, that she was the queen. And for a moment, that vision, which maybe she's been imagining for years, is going to have to change. And just recognizing that. And the midot that helped me to think about that first was this, quality that we talked about last week of like putting all the stuff in order, making sure that I was trying to respond in the best way possible for the questions that I think she was asking. And then there was this quality of being deliberate, making sure that what I was saying was kind and was generous, was understanding of her feeling. And then it was also deliberate and purposeful to say, okay, it looks like we're going to make a decision. Let's make a decision to move forward. And God willing, the choices that we've made are the ones that we're going to be able to act upon. Anybody else have anything to share? Okay, so just to hold on for this last part, just do the other side, and then we'll go back to the other side of this, and then conclude. Now think of another time when you had to take care of another, but you resented it, even a little, or you wanted a thank you or some type of praise. Have you thought about that? Those happen a lot too. Now imagine the chance that you had to do that over again. What experience can you bring from the first time when you did not want anything in return? What qualities or virtues, what midot would be helpful for you to accomplish that? What tools do you need? What muscles do you need to flex in order to behave in that way, the best way possible? So bring your attention back to the room and thinking about that. That brings us back to the original subject of what pre-shoot is all about. Separation, as I think we've tried to share, is the beginning not of righteous behavior, but of like profound kindness, of saintliness. It's a way of being in the world, but the way of being in the world isn't something that's just innate. Some of us might be a little bit more attuned to this quality and way of being than others. And you know those people who are in your world around you. And some people are less well practiced in that innate kindness virtue. And while you would like to correct them, the task that's at hand is about how do you become more masterful in this quality of kindness for yourself? Because when you do that, what I think we've learned is that through radical disinterestedness of understanding how your discretion, thinking about how you're going to respond versus understanding the way of being that you're going to respond, and understanding that that quality of thinking about your own actions and being responsible for your own actions are things that help you increase your capacity for kindness in the world, is what makes this work so important and so valuable. So let me just stop before the last conclusion. Any comments, any additions to that? How about a share? What did you like about this? What is it that you're taking away, that you're learning from this, that perhaps we can all learn from, if you would be comfortable to share? So anyone to go first? Don't be shy. What did you learn from this?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is kind of, I think of this sort of as, compartmentalization. Something that I do in my work so that I can do my work. As for those of you who don't know me, I'm a physician and I take care of a lot of very sick patients. And I'm a nephrologist, so a lot of patients who have kidney failure on dialysis, and they're complicated. And it's easy to get connected to these people because you see them frequently. And you get to know their families and their caregivers. And it's also, these are also a patient population that I get to know over a very long period of time. So you get connected to them emotionally as well. But then when the going gets rough, I compartmentalize, I separate from that emotional side, and I focus on the task at hand. And I go back to my skills, to the hardcore skills that I've learned in order to be able to take care of the situation at hand and not get caught up in the emotional side of it. So sometimes that doesn't necessarily come across so close, but it allows me to do my job better. And so as I was hearing through these different explanations and putting together my personal experiences, a lot of it has to do with what I do for a living, and how I separate in order to be better at what I do.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else? Something that you learned from our learning?
I
Yeah.
can share something.
Great.
Oh, does someone
Laura.
else want to go? Okay.
Laura.
Okay. When we were talking about kindness and about the meditation and about doing for others with, you know, complete openness, and then doing for others, and sometimes there's some resentment, you know, it made me think that I find sometimes it's easier for me to be very open and available for people who aren't necessarily my closest. So to say the real honest thing is that I can give a friend, or like I have a cousin who I'm very close with, and I'll spend time, or other people in my life, and I'll really spend time on the phone, listening and being there fully present. And then here at home, I can see I don't have as much patience or sitting as willingly with my husband or with my kids. And so that's the thing that came out for me as a learning, that I could see, you know, and be gentle with myself about it. But the time, you can probably hear the kids in the background, but the time that I'm willing to give to others to focus that and give that here at home, even when it's the end of the day and I'm tired and I kind of want to do more for me, but you know, my spouse is here, or my kids, it's probably easier even with my kids. It's probably more for my spouse. I need to be more in tune. So.
Thank you. That was incredible. And I really appreciate you personalizing it too. Because I think we can all relate. I think everything that you just said is very common and similar to our experience. And talk about pre-shoot and kiddusha, separation and connection, right? That we all feel that. And I think both Larry and Laura, you both have brought how we have to compartmentalize, and the task is to be able, in our compartmentalization of the way that we treat other people, to make sure that even if our behavior is different, it's still at the level that's the best possible. And it takes work. That's good. Anybody else want to share? Yes, no? You're good? I want to say thank you then. Thank you all for learning with me. So next week, when it comes to our learning, we're actually going to be on Tuesday night and Thursday night holding two distinct and unique learning sessions about how to do Seder and Passover online. So Tuesday night is going to be all about how to prepare the Seder online, from the technical details to the more important things, like how do you gather meaningfully, which I think is very important. We may know how to, you know, plug everybody in, but once you get everybody in the room, how do you make sure that everybody's together? And then on a Thursday night, we're going to talk about how do you use not only the online platforms, but like what tips and strategies can you do to make your Seder actually really meaningful and engaging. And we're going to be providing a whole bunch of resources to that effect. And I hope that you'll partake in that. And I thank you all for learning tonight. Thanks for joining in on the Zoom class. Be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for additional classes like this. I hope you enjoyed the learning, and that we'll continue to learn in the future. So take care, everybody. Have a very, very good evening, and an early Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.